Renewed questions about rail safety and regulations after a second Norfolk Southern train derailed over the weekend. In the latest, 28 cars slid off the tracks, though no one was injured. But East Palestine, Ohio, still assessing environmental and public health conditions as a result of burning toxic chemicals in the wake of that February 3rd derailment. Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen Vice President and National Legal Representative Verna is here with us. Vince, nice to see you. Ohio Congressman Mike Turner called this truly outrageous what's happening. What is happening with our nation's rail system right now?
Well, unfortunately, I think that in the recent past, we've seen a lot of deregulation fever that has swept through the sort of industry in recent years. And I think that unfortunately, despite warnings over many years that taking away safety regulations was a bad idea, we're starting to see that these accidents come home to roost, so to speak. I'm very, very glad that the most recent accident, there were no fatalities. The men and women that I represent, the locomotive engineers and trainmen, they're a very, very professional, world-class workforce. And what's happening now, I think we could really use more regulatory oversight. And that's really what we're seeing right now.
Vince, what would that regulatory oversight look like? I know you recently met with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. What can you tell us about those conversations and exactly what you think needs to be implemented from a regulatory perspective?
Well, the Department of Transportation and the Federal Railroad Administration right now they've taken some positive steps, one of which is a notice of proposed rulemaking on minimum crew size standards, a two-person crew regulation that has to have one certified engineer and one certified conductor in the cab of a locomotive. That will not prevent every accident. That it didn't prevent the one in East Palestine. But what we've seen over and over is the evidence suggests that after one of these accidents happens, having more than one person on a crew helps to mitigate the scale of the disaster, because if you have mobile people on the crew, they can separate the train at cars that are not tank cars that aren't on fire from ones that are on fire, and it helps lessen the disaster itself. Other things that are happening right now is that they're taking another look at legislation. There's a bill by Senator Brown and Senator Vance being advanced that would raise the fines on railroads from the current cap, which I think is around $225,000, which the railroads are multi-billion-dollar corporations. That type of low fine cap is really just like a slap on the wrist to these companies.
Interesting. You mentioned the impact of deregulation here. How has the national employment shortage impacted the rail industry as well?
Well, the employment shortage in the rail industry, we really believe is sort of self-inflicted by the industry's adoption of a rapid, really extreme cost-cutting business model called precision scheduled railroading. It's really driven away a lot of employees because railroad employees work without a regular schedule. Most of them go to work on call as far as the operating employees that we represent. And so the employment picture is, the precision scheduled railroading basically took employment down 30% in a matter of about 2 years. And it's really affected not just safety, but it's also affected service. But because of the cuts in regulation that have coincided with this cost-cutting business model, I think we're seeing more risk injected into the industry, unfortunately.
And Vince, is that risk across the board? Or when you look at Norfolk Southern, their safety record, they have a long list of accidents, even just going back over the last 4 or 5 years. Is Norfolk Southern an outlier, or is this an industry-wide issue?
Well, I don't think Norfolk Southern is an outlier, but I would be quick to point out that the risk that is in the industry would go across the board pretty much with with the Class 1 railroads that have the scope and size of a railroad like Norfolk Southern. So while I think there's a lot of attention that has been rightly paid on Norfolk Southern, the other Class 1 railroads, all of these deregulatory efforts that we've just talked about, all of the railroads, the Class 1 railroads, have pushed for these deregulations and are benefiting from the fact that they were able to prevail with the oversight agency at FRA to get regulations rolled back.
Okay, Vince, Verna, got to leave it there. Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, really appreciate your insights there. Thank you.